Morning, friends.
Morning, Bante.
Get started in just a minute. This first session of the morning will be about 45 minutes. So I'll give the next block of instruction and then we'll sit through whatever's left until 9:45. And we'll have a chance to do some walking meditation. So you can just adjust yourself comfortably, for the talk, knowing that you'll have a little bit of time afterwards to kind of get in a nice Buddha posture. You'll really go for it for 15 minutes. Okay. Welcome to day 2 of our meditation retreat. Possible, maybe we can have all our microphones muted, except me, of course. Thank you. Yeah. All right, so we begin again. And this is what it's like with meditation. We've done a bunch of stuff and we come and we sit down and we start again. And one of the hardest aspects of samadhi practice, is really the determination to do it right. The acceptance that samadhi is a lot like our breath. It comes and it goes. It waxes and it wanes. We're not out of control. We're not in control of it. And I feel like I've already said this before, because this is the hardest realization. One that we will struggle against. Oh, how we will struggle. We will change our posture. We'll change when we sit. We'll stack the cushions up high, and then sometimes we'll sit on bare floor. We'll take supplements. We'll change when we eat our breakfast, when we eat our lunch, when we eat our dinner. We'll try every possible combination of changing the external circumstances to try to get this experience of samadhi. And ultimately, what it boils down to is the acceptance of starting from the beginning and working at it, knowing that it's going to be like an in-breath and then an out-breath. We're going to make a little progress, and we're going to let that progress go. And then we're going to make a little more progress, and we're going to let that progress go. And that is the true development of samadhi. Because samadhi is not a destination. It's really hard because even the language we use for samadhi, for the stages, for the jhanas, it sounds like we're talking about you're going to get something. You're going to get somewhere, and then you're going to be good. And if you can just get there, you'll be happy. And that's what our mind has been telling us since the day we were born. If I just was over there, I would be happy. Very rarely does it ever say, no, I'm totally good. You don't have to go anywhere. We don't have to do anything. I'm happy. Our mind isn't made for that. It's like the scavenger. It's like a dog or a cat. It's just constantly searching. Happiness is out there somewhere. The next meal is out there somewhere. That's what it's for, which is exactly why we're working to tame it. So samadhi is not a destination. Samadhi is a tool. It's one of the tools in our toolboxes, and we have to develop this tool for use in the bigger picture, being free of suffering completely. So samadhi may wax and wane, it might come and go, it might flow like the breath, but it's very useful for developing that freedom that doesn't come and go. Freedom based on relinquishing, freedom based on giving up, freedom based on not picking up burdens. So samadhi starts with that process. Samadhi starts with putting down our burdens. We don't go into samadhi trying to get something. We're like, okay, that whole mind state makes me crazy most of the time. So I'm gonna set it down right here. That's our first level of samadhi. Putting down all of the stuff we think that we should be doing and saying, okay, let me arrive. And last night during the question and answer session, a lot of good questions, a lot of good dialogue. I always appreciate that. And a lot of the crosstalk was around everybody coming to the conclusion that they're all at stage 0. Okay, you're talking about 2, 3, 4, but we're all here at 0. And I really like that. Me too. Like, I want to join that club because that actually reflects growth in samadhi practice. To be okay sitting down and not immediately getting anywhere. That's a huge, huge step, because it's an acknowledgement that the beginning 2 stages, stage 1 and 2 of breath meditation, is a function of mindfulness. Our success in those first 2 stages, while we have to be intentional to develop them, our success is going to be measured by how much of the other 7 parts of the Eightfold Path we've been developing. Yeah? And this is why the Buddha frames them in a particular way. Stage 0, the Buddha says, ever mindful, they breathe in, ever mindful, they breathe out. And breathing in long, they know I breathe in long. Breathing out long, they know I breathe out long. And stage 2 is breathing in short, they know I breathe in short. Breathing out short, they know I breathe out short. You could see these as one thing, or as 3 things, or as 3 functions of the same process. But they all have to be developed before we move on, before we train the mind. So first we need mindfulness, and that's why stage 0 is so important. And we really should sit down in every sitting and make sure that the hindrances are gone. Like, when we sit down, do we know where we are? And really, you take a moment and you look, like, oh, okay, the sun's coming in, there's a fan going. Oh, okay, that's really what we have to do, because that mindfulness is mindfulness of what's going on. How are we sitting? We sat down with a particular intention. What was that intention? That will be reflected in how we're sitting. And giving the mind a little bit of time to settle. And while it's settling, we take stock. What is the mind saying? Do we even want to be here? Or is it talking about something else? And this is very wonderful when we begin to harness this energy, to let go of the idea that we really quickly need to get to the later stages of samadhi. And that understanding, one of our greatest assets is knowing exactly what we're going to do when we first sit down. And then when that is done, we know what we'll do next. Because all of life, biggest projects are all about knowing what the next step is. You could plan to build a 5-story temple. Well, you need to know where the first brick is going to go. That's what you start with. And with samadhi, we always start by arriving, by trying to get the mind to settle and watching for these hindrances, watching for the things that are trying to get us to get up from our seat. And when these go quiet, now we can start to develop the mindfulness of breathing. So we take just basic awareness of what's going on, and we start to be selective. Step one, we're going to set a place where we're looking for the breath, and our task will be keeping the mindfulness in that area. And it's a lot like keeping a finger on something. We can do just about anything. If we just keep our finger on that thing, then we will be stable. The same with our mind. It actually wants to have a reference point. But the thing is, it's trying to look for a reference point based on something that will make it happy. It's trying to find something exciting to focus on. And instead, we got to say, no, just keep focusing on this. This is the thing you keep your finger on. So this is going to help us establish sense restraint. Whether we're paying attention to the breath at the nose, or the rise and fall of the chest, or the belly, it doesn't have to be an exact area. So we're letting go of that notion. We're letting go of trying to control things. It's more like we're just pointing a flashlight in that direction. We don't have to have strong sensations. We want the mindfulness to be continuous. Stage 2, now we're going to start to just very gradually turn up the dial on our sensitivity. And I say very gradually because the goal is not the sensitivity. The goal is allowing our mindfulness to become stronger. So we just dial it up slightly. We start to be open to subtle sensations at the place where we're watching for our breath. Subtle sensations, whatever these might be, air flowing over something, subtle warmth, tingling, cool, pressure, anything. You're just letting them go. It doesn't matter what they are. We don't need a story for them. Just the fact that we feel them is this stage 2. And we're going to notice that just like the breath, this is coming and going. We'll have times when suddenly we're getting really good subtle sensations, and then times when we're not getting many at all. So the whole practice is to be mindful of this coming and going. This step is not under our control. This step is based on causes and conditions. We're just opening to it and being specific, looking for sensations in this area. And so we're developing these 2 facets of mindfulness. 1, location, and 2, quality, subtlety. So we want strong mindfulness. At this point, I can probably address again, something I've brought up several times, and that's skipping steps. So if you've ever read the Anapanasati Sutta, the discourse on mindfulness of breathing, it's 16 steps. You probably would have read all 16 steps all at once. Everybody does it. I did it. You probably did it. Everybody does it. Knowing that you're going to have to work on the first few steps for a long time to get really good at them, still you read all 16. Likewise, when we sit down to meditate, we know that there are future stages of deep meditation coming, and we're already looking for those stages. We're already looking for enjoyment. We're already looking for tranquility. We're looking for things like the body disappearing and entering this wonderful open space. We're looking for those things. And what happens if we actually see them? Well, that's part of the flow of the breath. Sometimes we're going to have access to those things. But if we try to skip steps, then what will we do when we don't have access to those things? And so how hard it is to kind of have that experience and then go into the next sitting and not be able to get to it. We've kind of lost our sense of direction. And so, like I said, one of the hardest things about samadhi practice is committing to doing it right. The thing is, if we do it right, though, it's building the foundation of the building very strong before we put on the next layer, and then making that very strong before we put on the next one. So that every time we sit, we can very quickly be like, okay, hindrances, yeah. Once we know them, they don't have the same impact. They become kind of like little clouds. So if you were doing the retreat yesterday, then you might have sat down this morning and you had all sorts of hindrances. The mind was trying to do all sorts of things, but you were like, you guys are hindrances. You knew it. And you could say it. So that is an improvement already, because you focused on the first preliminary step. You were able to see the hindrances and you knew that they had to be gone before you could get any further. And so you took the time to be like, okay, get out. No. You cleared the space a little. And maybe they kept coming back as you started to get a sense of mindfulness where you were looking for the breath, but you would be able to see them. So there's no point that you will be totally done with a step and never have to go back. It's just like the breath. It waxes and wanes. There'll be those moments where we're doing step one or we're doing step two, and suddenly something happens, or we feel an ache and our mind drops down. But if we've really developed and we know the sequence, we'll very quickly be able to readjust, very quickly get back to doing what we were doing. There was famous dialogue with a judo master of the last century. And he had all of his students around, and he was demonstrating his techniques for the students. And he was sparring with multiple opponents at once. And his students were just marveling. At the end, they're like, "Master, you're incredible. I can't believe your level of skill. You never lose your balance." And he's like, "You're totally wrong. I lost my balance all over the place." And he pointed out, when I did that move, when I did that move, when I did that move, I lost my balance. The difference between master and student is not in not losing your balance, it's in how quickly you recorrect. And so if we've made it our point to develop samadhi in the right way, then we have gone through the steps in order. Anytime something throws us off, we'll just very quickly recorrect, get back to where we were. And now that is the real power of samadhi. That is the real skill that we're able to develop. That's when it's a very useful tool, because that's when it's a reliable tool. We might not be able to say exactly where we're going to end up, because some of it is based on just the conditions. If we're sick, we're not going to get as far. If we're tired, we're not going to get as far. If there's a lot of noise, we might not get as far. But we know we'll get somewhere, because we know where we're starting. And now I say all of this as a kind of prelude to step 3, because step 3 is a transition point. And it's a point where we're going to do something that is not necessarily going in line with the nature of the mind or the natural development of mindfulness. And so this is where the Buddha starts adding the word sikkati, sikha. And if we recognize sikha is the same word we use when we take the precepts. The precepts, the sikkhapada, are trainings. We don't say, okay, I'm never going to kill again. We say, I'm going to practice not killing, because it's more realistic. If we've spent our whole life not even thinking about whether or not we're killing little bugs, and then one day we're like, oh, I guess I should stop that, then it's a training. We're going to have to get better at it. Likewise, The third step has this caveat, and all future steps have this caveat, because we're going to be adding things now to our samadhi, which will make it stronger, more sublime, more unimpeachable, more stable. So we're not going to go with the natural forces of mind, which might try to encourage us to narrow things down and focus down to a pinpoint. This is not about pinpoint concentration. Samadhi is about stability of mind. So we're going to start to ease it out. One metaphor might be a garden plot. So our retreat coordinator, Alex here, he just recently started a garden. And before it was a garden, it was just a hillside. So he had a lot of clearing out to do. And imagine that you've come across a garden that you've left abandoned for a few years. We've probably all had to do this at some point. Somebody decided this was a flower garden. Then they didn't do anything with it for a few years. And you come up and you're like, no, that's weeds. But this is the beginning of our practice. We've got a garden, and it's only a garden because somebody said it's a garden. Likewise, we've got a body and mind, and we've only got a body and mind because we were born. If we hadn't been born, we wouldn't have a body and mind. There'd be no problem. There'd be no weeding that needs to be done. But we were born. We have a body and mind, and we've been leaving it untended our entire lives. So the beginning, the first two steps, we just need to clear out the weeds. The first two steps, they seem like work. And we're going to have to spend a lot of time on them, but they're not actually work in the larger sense, because we're just undoing the inattentiveness that we've had going our whole lives. Once we undo our reliance on the hindrances to figure out what we're paying attention to, then we're done. We've kind of pulled all the weeds and we've kind of cleared it. And every now and then we'll have to go back and pull out a new weed. But we've kind of set the field. Everything that happens past the first two steps is deciding what we want to grow in our garden. That's the beautiful work. That's the cultivation. So step 3 is, they train thus. I will breathe in, experiencing the whole body. And they train thus. I will breathe out, experiencing the whole body. There are two important facets. This one is the whole body, sabakaya. So why the whole body? Well, it's like the garden, right? What are the edges of the garden? It's the posts. And what's the edges of the plot that we're trying to cultivate? You know, it's our body. That is the limit of the things that we take responsibility for. On the deepest sense, our consciousness is already conditioned to end at the skin, or technically the hairs. Sometimes we identify with those, but we've been doing it our whole life. This is me. This is floor. Me, floor. There's a difference. Yeah. And so this is a very natural place to open our consciousness towards. If we're trying to resist the impulse to get pinpoint and blot everything else out, then where do we set the confines of our awareness? And now anything that contacts the body, we're probably going to be aware of and might disrupt our mindfulness. So we're going to take that mindfulness we developed in step 1, a mindfulness that's able to resist the urge to run off. And we're going to expand it to the whole body so that anything that comes in contact with the body we're aware of, but the mind doesn't move. And we're going to take that subtle awareness that, as we've dialed it in with step 2, has gotten very interesting. We're like, ooh, it's very attractive. It's actually gotten us to let go of a lot of the external environment anyway, because stuff is happening here. We want to experience more. We want to pay attention to that. That's really cool. It feels fantastic to actually be aware of what's going on. We're going to take that and expand that as well. And we do this simultaneously, and we do it gradually. And the rate that we do it is bounded by the second part, and that is we're doing it while we are breathing. Okay, so this is counter to what our natural impulse is. Our natural impulse is to be like, okay, I'm going to feel the whole body. Okay, good. We think of it as a static state. And that is our natural impulse. Okay, I'm going to feel my hands. Okay, good. But you can't hold that, right? You're like, okay, I'm going to keep feeling my hands. Okay, there I was thinking about the birds. The mind is like the breath. It's in and out and in and out. So we can't just decide to feel our whole body. Instead, we've got to open to the experience of feeling our whole body in tune with the breath. Because it's not really about getting to the experience of our whole body, but it's about getting past the resistance that is naturally there in the body. And we get past the resistance, as I said in step 1, by letting the body breathe. So with every breath, we're just going to open to the idea that the breath is coming in contact with more and more of our body. And the whole body is moving subtly, is energized subtly by the breath. That's already happening. We're just allowing mindfulness now. We're giving it the ability to accept that and to focus on that. And so what we're going to be doing is taking all of the wonderful mindfulness and subtle mindfulness that we've developed, and we're going to let that subtle mindfulness get out to every bit of our body. But we're going to do it gradually. So we're gonna basically start by noticing the things that we start to feel close to where we've been focusing on the breath. And then as we get better at that, we'll include more of it, and we'll let the inflow of air into our lungs kind of guide us. Anywhere that our minds can start to pay attention to, that there isn't any resistance as the breath comes and goes, we can start to include that. All of this is wonderful. And I've known some meditators who, as soon as they sit down to pay attention to the breath, they're like, oh, I can feel it everywhere in my body. And that's great. But they get distracted very easily if they try to start with step 3. So we're going to start actually by improving our mindfulness so that it's very good and stable. And then we're going to gradually expand. So the end goal of stage 3 is going to be to have that same strong mindfulness everywhere in our body, to be able to see sensations as just sensations, not getting caught up on the pleasant ones or the unpleasant ones. And now this is the seed of an idea. As I say, don't jump off to it until you have stable, subtle mindfulness of the breath where you chose. And just like the breath, you're going to get opportunities to explore stage 3 at different times. In certain sittings, you're going to have more energy. It's going to happen naturally. Step 2 will come easier, and then you'll be like, I think I can kind of expand this a little. And sometimes you're going to try that, and your mind is going to get diffuse. It's going to spread out, and you'll start to lose yourself. You'll start to fall asleep. Kind of pointed that out yesterday, is that when people are having trouble with the drowsiness in meditation, often it's because they weren't able to correctly dial in how close they need to pay attention to the breath. And so this is a stage where we're going to actually get it perfectly dialed in, because there's a natural container for our breath. And we're going to keep expanding it until we reach the confines of that container, and then we don't have to go anywhere else, because nothing that happens out here needs to bother us if our entire body is saturated with mindfulness. And this is a stage that we can train in. And it's a lot like I grew up with like martial arts movies and stuff. And martial arts movies, these wonderful kind of montages where the teacher has the student do all kinds of ridiculous things. And I've already suggested some of these, like, keeping your finger on an object as you go about your room or your day, or when you're out in the woods, just stopping and actually just reaching up and feeling what the leaves feel like. It's like it's stupid and it's silly, but it's like this idea of like training. What would you do to get better at something like this? If that idea excites you, then now you get why this can be fun. It's not like homework. You do not have to do samadhi practice. But if you do it, it's like somebody who trains diligently in a skill. Once they've got that skill mastered, everybody else is like, that's amazing. You sit down for meditation and you actually enjoy yourself. And everybody else who's all crumpled up is like, I hate that guy. What is he doing? What is he doing different? Nothing different necessarily. Just did it in the right order, did it sequentially, let it develop, trained. Yeah. Think of it as a training montage. You go up to the Buddha and you say, okay, I'm a mess. I'm a mess, train me. And then do what he says. He's like, okay, preliminaries, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. Train yourself, get better at it day by day, and accept it's going to come and go. Work with your cycles, work with your flow. Yeah. Take advantage when you've got a lot of strength and accept when you don't. This whole retreat is kind of designed to be kind of an easier schedule, kind of loose, going with the schedule of your day, because we need that flow. We need that flow to make progress. Yeah. Our retreat schedule, our daily schedule, has to mimic our breath and has to have times of application and times of release. And so finding that and taking advantage of that to make these little bits of progress. Some thoughts to sit with. We sit for 15 minutes and just let that kind of sink in. And we'll have a chance for walking meditation to kind of loosen things up. Okay. This time we're going to do about half an hour of walking meditation. And to just say just a little bit, carrying on from the original instructions yesterday at this time on how to do walking meditation. So I talked about how step one can be thought of in terms of walking meditation is like picking an area of your body that you're going to pay attention to while you're walking, and just keeping mindfulness of that area as it moves through space. So not letting the mind kind of go out all over the place. Or if we are aware of things going on around us, we're also aware of that point on our body where we chose. Soles of our feet, our shoulders, our nose, whatever. Doesn't really matter. Our hands. What matters is that we decide beforehand, and we just try to do that exercise, or keep our mind aware of that at all times, even if other things are happening. The way that step two might come about is it's much more subtle, and it's also a very natural progression. So this might seem antithetical, that you can be walking back and forth and yet be aware of subtle sensations. But that's exactly what can start to happen. Samadhi still develops on the walking path. So, but how to describe that or experience that? I like to, again, I'm kind of partial to the like martial arts training montage idea. And, so you might try the experience of thinking from a particular part of your body. So imagine you were moving through a room with your hand out in front of you, and you had your eyes closed or something. And so your entire consciousness, your mindfulness would start to collect at your fingers, because that's where all the action is going to happen. Yeah. There's somebody who's blind gets very sensitive on the tips of their fingers. They can read Braille, which the rest of us is just almost imperceptible little bumps on a piece of paper, just because of where they're putting their mind. So imagine if I were to do everything with my nose. It sounds ridiculous, yeah? I would open the refrigerator with my nose. I need to dry a towel, I would do it with my nose. But this is exactly the kind of goofy training idea that might help us understand what it's like to be aware of a part of our body more subtly. If we keep using that part of our body, if we keep going there consciously, we're going to become more aware of the subtleties of it, and it will get more interesting. At first, it's very frustrating because I want to be doing this. But after a while, it becomes very relaxing. We're like, good old bell. It's always here when I need it. Wherever I need it, it's always here. I always know where it is. The mind is the same way. And if we keep using something, if we keep focusing on something, we might notice that there's a lot going on. So I actually like to use, this area of my shoulders and the collarbone, because I've paid attention to it enough that it's very interesting. There's a lot going on there. You cannot walk without these things moving in subtle ways. But anybody else is going to completely miss that. It's only interesting and subtle because I've developed it. So I've paid attention to it a lot. Some people, that's the soles of their feet. They start walking barefoot. They just love like stretching their toes out and feeling all the little rocks and stuff. If that works for you, do it, because that will help you get engaged with the meditation. And that's probably where things are. So samadhi will develop a bit slower on the walking path than it does on the sitting cushion. So I could talk about full body mindfulness, but these things they work the exact same way, just at a slightly different pace. Yeah. So it's just some thoughts to work with. We'll come back at 10:15, though I might not come back at 10 o'clock. Anybody who wants a meditation interview here, meditation interview here, we'll have a chance to get one. And then I'll be doing the same at 1 o'clock. So if I don't show up on the sitting cushion at 1 o'clock, will there even be a live feed? There might not be a live feed at 1 o'clock. I'll kind of need the computer. So meditate on your own. And we'll say the live feed will probably start about 2 o'clock, but that's okay because the first talk won't be till 3. Okay, so we'll walk for about half an hour, then we'll come back, we'll round it out with a 45-minute sitting until 11. Okay. You did it. You're still here. You didn't run away. That's the hardest part. I could make some complaint about the heat, but everybody who's online is at a closer to the equator than we are, so it would sound kind of silly. But Miami and Texas. And all right, so this time we're going to begin our lunch break. And just like yesterday, the focus is not on hyper mindfulness, because that might help you if you were trying to do something concentrated. But in terms of samadhi, you need an element of relaxation. So try to flow through the activities. Try not to struggle. Even take a little power nap. So often samadhi benefits from your body getting just that little bit of time to unwind. Enter with as little tension as you can, and your afternoon meditation will benefit. Anybody online who would like to get a meditation interview, those will begin at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, but there'll be 15-minute slots. So if you would like one, just send an email to info@upavana.org, and I'll tell you what slot you've got. And so the live feed might not show up until 2 p.m. or so, but the first talk will be at 3, so definitely look for that. And we'll start sitting and walking at 1, but for those 2 hours, it'll be at your own pace. You decide. You want to sit, you want to walk, you want to sit for an hour and then walk for an hour. Just find your rhythm, okay? So see you all later this afternoon.